I'm Devon Hood. I go to Regent School of Austin in Austin, Texas. I've been studying Latin for 5 years, and I love it.
So, Devin, tell us. I know that you finished your sophomore year, and you've already gone through AP Latin. How did you get interested in Latin in the first place?
This is a really funny story, actually. So, when I was, I think, 3 or 4 years old, my mom found this book company, and they make educational books for kids. And the one that I really liked was this textbook about this thick, and it was world history going from like the cavemen all the way up, I think, to like 2000. And my favorite part was always the ancient Egyptians and Romans and Greeks. And so I would just stay up late at night, and when other kids were watching TV, I was reading about the Punic Wars. And so that classical history and literature was always something I was interested in. And then when I came to Regents in sixth grade, I really was excited about studying Latin, and that's actually why I went to Regents in the first place, is because I wanted to get that classical education and not just public school basic stuff. And at my school, there are a lot of people who are like, oh, well, Latin's a dead language. It's so stupid. You're such a nerd. But for me, I mean, I really enjoy it because it's opened up my eyes to so much in the world around me. Like, I mean, the words that I see in books or in newspapers, even if I don't necessarily know what it means, I can kind of piece it together by saying, oh, well, in Latin, this means this and that means that. So it probably means something like this. And actually, in Latin 3, we were working on translating some of Cicero's great speeches and reading how he pieced together his arguments and the rhetoric that went behind how he was able to communicate so effectively actually started to influence my writing style. And I could kind of see the changes in how I organized my arguments and my thoughts, because from studying the classical texts, which we base a lot of our modern rhetoric and logic on, I'm able to just have a deeper understanding of how to communicate more effectively.
Mm-hmm. Now, often people will say, you mentioned some students who think it's kind of nerdy to study Latin. In what ways have you seen Latin kind of opening up your life to other interests or possibilities? In other words, does the study of Latin is certainly good for Latin itself. You mentioned that it can actually help your writing, right? It's helping you to think more logically. Are there other ways in which your experience with Latin started to lead you to new ways of thinking, new ways of imagining a life, deeper insight into other things you were studying, things like that?
Well, it definitely has helped me a lot in my literature classes because, I mean, it's not only changed the way that I write, but it's really enriched my vocabulary because there's so many complex, beautiful words in English that come from Latin. And so I feel more capable of using those and using them correctly, not sounding like I'm making up words.
Mm-hmm.
And whenever we do read things in literature or study things in history that have some root to Latin or ancient Rome, I'm able to kind of have a little more backstory because I can say, oh, well, when our teacher talked about this person, they actually said this and felt this way about all of these things. And it kind of makes the things that I study at my classical school a little more tangible, I guess.
Mm-hmm. How about if you think about your future life, your future profession, whatever that might be, whatever you might study in college, or things you also dream about doing? Have you made any connections to your study of this great language and other things you've dreamed about doing? You mentioned, for example, writing, so obviously whatever you do that involves writing is going to help, or helping you to be a clearer thinker and just expanded vocabulary. But have there been any other ways where you've seen connections between your Latin study and a possible future life?
Well, I don't know if I would want to major in Latin or classical studies, but it's interesting because my dad isn't a lawyer, but his job does involve working with a lot of lawyers. And so when he shows me some of the legal documents that they work with or talks about some of the things that the lawyers say, I'm able to kind of understand all the legal jargon because a lot of it is in Latin, like habeas corpus and malum in se. Um, and I feel like even though I don't necessarily want to pursue classics as a profession, being able to understand a lot of the texts that we have that are in Latin, that are from great people like Cicero, Cato, and just so many great thinkers that we still very much esteem today, it's kind of helped me become a better person, I guess. My great uncle gave me this tiny little book, and it was, I think it's called How to Win an Election, and it's actually by Cicero's brother, and it's a collection of letters that this guy wrote to Cicero when he was running for the consulship. And I think there's one side in Latin and one side in English. And so when I've been able to actually read the Latin, I get all of this great advice, not just about how to win an election, but how to understand people better, how to be more persuasive, how to relate to people who aren't necessarily like me, which maybe sounds a little out there, but there's just so much knowledge that can come from being able to read a text in its original language and still have the whole meaning there.
So now I'll ask you a question that's just much more subjective, but it sounds like you said some things that indicate that Latin's just been fun for you too, right? That even if it doesn't have even if we're not trying to make practical connections, like this will help you be a better lawyer or do well in law school or be a better writer, are there some ways in which Latin has just been a personal delight to you? Just enjoying the subject for its own sake, What does that look like when you find yourself just being happy with doing some Latin, even when you're not thinking about how it's going to improve yourself or make you better at some skill?
Well, one thing I've noticed being in Italy is that there's so many little inscriptions in churches that are all in Latin, and so I get really excited when I can actually use the Latin outside of the classroom and be able to read these paragraphs in churches and in catacombs. And I have a lot of my really good friends in my Latin class, and we can all joke about it together, and we get really excited when like certain things happen. And when we were translating the Aeneid in AP Latin, having already read it in ninth grade, I already knew the story, but I would get really excited because I'd be like, oh, this is coming up. That's what it means when they said that in the English version. And my teacher is really funny, and I bet at some point he will probably watch this because he's a classical teacher, so he's probably going to be laughing right about now. But he definitely keeps our class very entertained, and there's never a dull moment. So,
Is an example that you float to your brain of something that was kind of just a blessing to you this week using your Latin?
I think actually going to the catacombs in Bolsena, there was that room that had all of the old tombstones and covers from the really, really old Christian tombs. And there was one, and it was some little girl named Maria, I think, and her parents were like, here lies Maria, she's 5 years old, 8 months, and like, I just thought it was really cool because, I mean, she died when she was 5, so it's not like she really could have left that much of a mark on the world in her time. But being able to read about her and kind of make a connection with someone who died over 1,000 years ago probably was just really meaningful for me.
Anything else come to your mind in terms of what you would say to a student or a parent about why study Latin? Imagine when you were in sixth grade, you were saying to your mom and dad, I want to go to a school where I can study Latin. And that parent is saying, why would I want to have my daughter or son spend all this time studying Latin? That's kind of the question we're trying to answer for people. So what comes to your mind? Why study Latin?
Well, you may not be able to go up to someone and speak it fluently, but I feel like it improves your thinking because Latin is very, very complex. And so if you're able to piece together these complicated sentences and phrases, then it gives you more problem solving ability, I think, because you have to get creative and you have to kind of step back and look at the big picture. And it's also easier to learn other Romance languages because I know Latin. So being here in Italy, Italian is basically Latin and English. So I can understand 95% of the signs and the booklets and sometimes what people say. So it's a really nice kind of gateway language, I guess. So I can learn Italian, or I could learn Spanish or French or Romanian or Portuguese or all those different languages that have their roots in Latin.